Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, The Good, the Bad, and Philosophy. In this video we're going to be looking at what is expected consequentialism. So, many critics of classic utilitarianism are concerned about how one can make a decision given that we never have enough information to determine the actual consequences of our actions. You might donate your kidney to a dying woman that seemed very kind, that actually ends up leading a genocide. Classical utilitarians are committed to the claim that the action of giving your kidney to her was morally wrong, even if there was no way for you to know that saving her would give rise to a genocide. This position, that our actions are judged based on their real consequences, no matter how unlikely, unpredictable, or unintended they were, is called actual consequentialism. In the face of this criticism, some consequentialists will stand their ground and defend classical utilitarianism, while others will revert to another version of consequentialism to avoid this objection. In this video, we're going to take a look at both approaches and some problems with each. So, the critic might go so far as to claim that actual consequentialists are effectively moral skeptics, since no one may tell whether any particular action is ever good. As a skeptic myself, this doesn't seem like a real problem, but I'll have my own problems with consequentialism from a different angle. But for a lot of consequentialists, this may seem worrisome. Now, the actual consequentialist has several ways of kind of biting the bullet in face of this objection. They can make a distinction between what is good and bad, and what is blameworthy or not. Basically, it may have been bad that you gave your kidney to the woman who would lead a genocide, but you're not blameworthy because of that. Well, it might be bad to help someone with a heavy bag if that means they were able to make a flight that would eventually crash and kill them because you've actually lessened the amount of happiness in the world. It wouldn't be blameworthy. But this just seems to kind of move what we're talking about to not being good or bad anymore, but rather to being what's blameworthy or not. And this seems to give rise to the concern of what we would classify as blameworthy or not. What makes that action blameworthy or not, and if that's what we can actually determine as opposed to what is or is not good or bad, why should we care about good and bad to begin with? Because we're never able to determine it. We can only determine what is or is not blameworthy. Now, one of the virtues of actual consequentialism is that it is usually framed as a version of quote-unquote objective consequentialism, which claims that the consequences of an action will be the same no matter who measures them. Some consequentialists who are convinced by these objections may retreat to a version of what's known as subjective consequentialism, where the consequences covered are dependent on who is measuring them. So objective consequentialism says that our consequences are measured objectively no matter who measures them. It's the same amount of pleasure or pain in the world. We can count up the endorphins running through your body to tell it, and everyone's going to count them the same. Whereas subjective consequentialism is saying, well, some things might be measured differently depending on who's measuring it. Foreseeable or predictable consequentialism is generally framed as a kind of subjective consequentialism. Basically, this claims that the good choice to make is the one that has the most foreseeable utility, or that you predict will result in the most utility, or whatever you value if you're a different kind of consequentialist that doesn't value utility. Check out the previous video for more on those kind of things. This is subjective if there is no objective standard for what is foreseeable or predictable. It seems that, well, a computer that's able to analyze all of the possible different scenarios and figure out what actually could be predicted and what isn't going to happen, they're going to predict something much differently than a normal person, than a chimpanzee would. And so what is predictable is going to vary not only across those, but even within the range of humans. Different people, based on their own life experiences, are going to predict different results or different outcomes, because maybe one person has seen a situation like this and it's gone one way, and another person's seen a situation like this and it's gone another way. So having an objective standard of what is foreseeable or predictable is going to be pretty tough. However, if we leave it to kind of a subjective situation, this is also going to be difficult. For example, if you predicted that driving at over twice the speed limit might lead to an accident, but did so anyway, you might be culpable for a resulting accident because the choice of driving over the speed limit or not, it was predictable that driving over the speed limit might lead you to being in an accident. But if the accident was a result of your car having a faulty part and there were no way for you to foresee that that part would break at that particular time, even though you made the choice to drive your car that day and that choice caused the accident, because it was not foreseeable, you're not morally responsible. And this could help with some of the problems of helping the person with their bag. Well, it's not foreseeable that the plane's going to crash, or it's not foreseeable that the nice woman you're giving your kidney to is going to lead to genocide. However, this could come under fire since someone might claim to not have foreseen what others might think are very obvious possible consequences. One might claim that they couldn't foresee that driving quickly would result in an accident. And it seems that in this situation, someone that is totally ignorant of possible bad consequences can never do anything wrong because they're always going to act on the foreseeable evidence that they have, which is effectively nothing. So there's some concerns here, as there will be with any kind of subjective consequentialism, because it seems that someone can kind of play dumb or have blame ignorance and end up doing things that are good by our standards. That they took that action and it was not just not blameworthy, but full-on good, even though it seems there were a lot of perhaps bad consequences. Now, another possible consequentialist position is to claim that what matters is what you intended to do. That an action is good if it maximizes the positive intended consequences. If you predicted that there was a chance that some food had been contaminated, but you served it to customers anyway and they became sick, so long as your intention was not to make them sick, but rather to feed them, your action would be good. This is one of the most lenient versions of this consequentialism we'll look at. This is going to rub a lot of intuitions the wrong way, especially people that have a normal intuition to be consequentialist. If you have more of a deontological intuition, this might not have as many concerns for you, but stronger consequentialists are going to say, ooh, that doesn't even feel like consequentialism anymore, because the kind of idea that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It seems that this will suffer from the same objections that the foreseeable consequences did, as well as the further objection that this will hold blameless the person that is really bad at assessing risks and keeps taking actions which result in negative consequences, but unintended negative consequences. If they always intend to do good but underestimate foreseeable risks, it seems like they are doing harm despite their intentions. Or to put it another way, we would be wrong not to stop them. If someone is consistently serving contaminated food at a restaurant without the intention of doing so, simply the misunderstanding around the consequences of their actions, it seems that we are morally obligated to stop them if we're aware of this. But it seems very strange to say that we are morally obligated to stop someone that is acting correctly, that is doing good. That seems really counterintuitive, but that seems to be what the intended consequentialist is committed to. Now, one position which is going to blur the lines between objective and subjective consequentialism is probability consequentialism. This states that you should act in accordance with the choice that is most likely to maximize utility. However, this seems to suffer from many of the problems of actual consequentialism, since even if we allow that probability is somehow objective, which is going to be hotly debated, it seems that even if I'm flipping a coin, if you had enough information about that coin flip, the person with more information of the exact velocity that you flip the coin and information about coins' properties when they move through the air and the air resistance and all of this, they might be able to predict pretty accurately where that coin's going to land, but anyone else in the room wouldn't be. So it seems in some situations probability may be subjective. But setting aside those concerns and saying that, okay, we'll take probability as objective, it seems that it'll be very difficult to know any particular probability of any action that you take enough to make a decision based on it. It seems that it's really weird for me to ask the question, well, should I give this woman my kidney? Well, let me calculate the odds of her going on to lead a genocide. There doesn't seem to be any really good way of me knowing that. And as a skeptic, I'm concerned that we can know anything, let alone very specific probabilities about our actions and their exact consequences for the rest of time. That seems like a very, very high bar to set, even as high a bar as the actual consequentialist is setting. And so if the probability consequentialist is saying, well, actually this is a solution, it doesn't seem to solve the original problem. One final solution is proximate consequentialism. So proximate consequentialism attempts to solve this problem with a legal definition. Basically, it states that the consequences of your actions go up to the point where someone else takes a voluntary action or coincidence intervenes. And it's going to be very tough to define exactly when those things happen. I'm concerned about this. It seems that if a villain, let's say, connects your doorbell to an electric collar attached to a dog, whenever someone voluntarily rings your doorbell, they zap a dog. Now, they took a voluntary action, but you or the villain set things into motion. You might claim that the villain is responsible, but they're defining how exactly their actions intervened is going to prove difficult. This is going to be tough. Why is it that those actions intervened, but it wasn't the case that, let's say, a gun manufacturer that made an extremely efficient guns actions didn't intervene in a person killing someone else? As I said, this is going to be even muddier when we talk about whether or not the gun manufacturer is liable for actions someone takes with their product, even if it takes someone to choose to pull a trigger. Some might say that making weapons or giving them to people you think will pull a trigger is morally wrong. But it seems that proximate consequentialism isn't going to give us a clear way to distinguish those things. And if that's not convincing, here's a stronger example. Imagine an arms dealer that sells a nuclear bomb to an extremist group. It seems that proximate consequentialists must claim that the arms dealer's actions were good, since the lives lost from the bomb were a result of the extremist group's intervening actions. I just sold the people that wanted to kill everyone a nuclear bomb. It was their choice to kill them. So, you know what? I'm blameless. That seems like a big problem for the proximate consequentialist. Whew, that was expected consequentialism. With that, we're going to wrap up this part on consequentialist ethics. I will remind you that once we finish up with our next section on virtue ethics, we're going to shift into the second half of this series, which is where we're going to look at actual problems in the world and ask, how would these various philosophical theories actually tackle these real-life ethical issues, which I'm really excited to get to. So, next up, before we get to that, though, we're going to cover virtue ethics. We'll talk about virtue, agent-centered virtue ethics, and target-centered virtue ethics. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.